Then I will review some part of the previous presentation briefly. Then what I would like to discuss is about custom integration based on the toolkit. And I'm working on Workspace Web Edition, and we are building an API allowing to reuse some pieces from Workspace to be embedded in the website, and reuse some components like the interaction bar, team communicator, and so on, and to create some advanced integration. And for this, I will use an environment to show you this. And I'm using, and I'm working on Workspace Web. In server side, we have the JUS. JUS is a large set of microservices to deploy, and I don't have this on my machine. Then, to simplify, we develop in parallel a simulator replicating a part of the API and events mechanism based on community to do some basic use cases. Then on my machine, I have deployed my simulator. Is there. It's an HTTP server running on Node.js. Then I have already an agent logged in. I will start the Genesis Airlines, and it's a fake website where we did integration with the toolkit to reuse some pieces, and you saw that from the simulator a session was already there related to John Smith, and when I requested the display of the sample, automatically the session has been identified and reused. This is the reason why John Smith is logged in automatically on this integration. Then with this integration, I am able to change the state of the agent with the global state menu. I have access to Team Communicator to engage someone or engage some resources as the routing point, or in the future interaction queue, and so on, for the service aspect. I'm able, from the custom code, I added a way to drag and drop the component. Also, this button in overlay, and those buttons are custom, allowing to display some pieces from Workspace. And I have Team Communicator plus the performance tracker. Also, this one has the possibility to be dragged everywhere from the interface. And when you switch to Team Communicator, we will remember where the window was set. If I simulate an incoming call, in this case, okay, need to restart the simulator. The fact that I use a session already there, break. I open the browser. I open the simulator on the port 7777. There is no session. I will come back to Genesis Airlines sample. I authorize pop-up notification. Sorry. By this way, if the toolkit, the custom page is not displayed, and I will have a system toast mentioning that there is an incoming call. Okay, let's go. It's the agent is now logged in, and I can create an inbound call. Yeah, normally we should have an inbound call. It was working just. For this session, what I would like to present is an extension about this. It's how to reuse the toolkit from different kind of deployment, and mostly now it's like to make a native application. Then for this, we use Electron to instantiate Workspace in this framework, and I'm running an Electron application, and this one is for this mode, and we are using like an iframe in this Electron application to reuse the full application when you have a full workspace. I'm loading John Smith on it. And you see that I have a workspace presented in this application. Based on Electron, what is interesting is not just to have to display a web page, you have also some integration with the system. Then for this demo, what was added is in the global menu from the system to inject the possibility to change the state of the agent. Then when I click on it, you can see that I can switch to ready. For example, my agent was not ready and now ready. I can put the agent back to ready break and so on. And this allows to have some native integration with the system. Also, with web implementation, you don't have access to hotkey. I mean that shortcut is seen at the system level. If the focus is not in the page, in JavaScript, we cannot capture the event. But with Electron, we can. For example, we put in place a custom shortcut allowing to have access to this menu and navigate and put the agent directly in a particular state. And this could be applied to different kind of operation. But in this case, it was related to just to the changing of state. It could be associated to the answer code. This one could be more interesting. Yeah. Also, okay. Yes, if I click on John Smith to mention that I use the rotate session and I create a new call. Yeah. Okay. Normally you should, there's a demo effect, sorry again. Normally you should have also a native toast from Electron appearing, and it means that you can have you can generate native toast if the interaction, if the application is not selected. And this is the mode that I presented with this is like a full workspace. And there is another instance of this integration with Electron. Is like you can mention like a gadget mode, making less space and closing the current session. Okay. Closing also the Electron application, and then running another one. And this one is the same, but with a particular parameter mentioning that this one is in gadget mode. And the presentation is really different. And in this case, instead of to reuse the full workspace, we reuse with the toolkit some PCs and put them at different places. You have the global state present there, and you have still the global menu present in the system level, with a shortcut allowing to change the state automatically. You have team communicator directly present in this case we are using just some pieces from workspace. And if you have an interaction, in this case it appears in this small area. And this is an example of what you can do in terms of integration with the toolkit by using if you want a full workspace or some PC.
Thank you, Stefan.
Just for information, tomorrow there is an end-zone for workspace, and you will learn. I will share to you the simulator. You will be able to deploy locally. There are two courses to discover the toolkit and web integration with different steps. In 2 hours, you will be able to put in place some interesting stuff, like the jelly starlight presented at the beginning. It's tomorrow morning. Thank you.
All right, thank you. My name is Kim Londo. I'm in product management. So my experience has been with CRM integrations. I have been working with CRMs for probably about 15 years plus. If I tell you more, then you guess my age. So we'll go there, okay? So anyway, some of the information that you got from Stefan actually works very well into doing a CRM integrations. So in our case here, I'm going to go over all of the different APIs that are available that you can use to integrate to different CRMs. So these are some of the examples that we have. And like I said, I want it to be a more interactive session. So feel welcome. I'm going to stop at each of these, and then you will be able to let me know what you are doing, in your company if you're interested in this. So right now, these are some of the specific APIs that we have available today in PureEngage Cloud, and it is part of our GWS 9.0. And so these same integration, these same API and tools will be going into premise in the future. So what we have is the custom, our agent API, which is our workspace API. These are the low-level APIs that you can use to basically create your own application from scratch. You can do these. We do have some tutorials, on our site, developer.genesiscloud.com. So you will be able to use some of those to build your own integration. We have the statistics API that will be used for real-time statistics. Task routing API is where in any applications, in any external application, including the CRM, you will be able to use their native, either scripting or web services call or their own, internal, probably, scripting languages to call to basically submit a task into Genesis so that it can be routed to the desktop. Authentication API, of course, that's the main API that we have for GWS9 in order for you to authenticate into our cloud, and or of course if you have GWS on-prem, that will be the authentication that you will be able to use. Provisioning API is basically the low-level API that we have that will allow you to create user records. It will allow you to be able to basically create a sync from your HR application directly into Genesis. Of course, you've heard about our Workspace Toolkit, which Stefan had just went over a little bit ago. Web application integration, these are integration that you can do when you're running Workspace Web. And of course, our Service Client API is in the same way. Those are the two lower ones are basically the very straight level, what we call cheap integrations that you can do when you have something quick that you want to do, some quick integration that you want to do. So basically, the Service Client API. This is the case where you are running Workspace Web in your contact center. With Workspace Web, you are able to basically create a URL into the CRM. In our case, this is an example of Salesforce. And as you know, Salesforce doesn't allow their application to be embedded in an iframe. And because of that, you will have to do the screen pop will basically be an external one. We have current customers today who are doing this in our cloud with many other applications. So actually, one of our customers that I visit every morning, every morning for my morning coffee, they actually use this type of integrations to screen pop into Oracle Service Cloud. So there are some setup that you have to do in Oracle Service Cloud, but it's possible to be done. The second one that we have is, of course, building CRM with Workspace Toolkit. So as you can see here, this is an example of our internal G+ adapter that we built. Both of these are actually, the lower one is our previous version, our 8.5 version of the G+ adapter, where this was when this was Salesforce Classic when they gave us a very narrow size. So it's 400 by 200. And at some point, they provide console, which will give you a little bit more room. But because we wanted to, to basically bring the same integration over, we use that. As you can see, the differences at the top is basically our workspace full size inside of Salesforce. In this case, what we get from this is the ability to very quickly inherit a lot of the new features that Workspace Web are offering to us. This is a very powerful integration to PureEngage Cloud, in the case that many of our customers may not just use the workspace. They may have one group that uses Workspace. They may have another group that uses Salesforce, for example, and then this way they will be able to onboard people as they become available. The second integration that you see there, as you can see, if you remember Stefan's saying that you kind of pick and choose the pieces of the toolkit that we want to use. So at that point, the main thing that we took from there is the status, the agent status. We took the team communicator. We didn't show it in here basically, but we took the team communicator. We reused many of the options that Workspace offer to us. And so some of the things like, for example, you see voice and work item. So basically, if we want to turn off work item, we can just set the options and it will turn it off. And for many others, some of the functionality like the dialing, the make call, the make call, or even in the context of the transfer, we basically reuse a lot of that logic from the toolkit. In addition to that, we also are able to inject our own adapter code into the toolkit, basically in such a way that it will allow us to basically, when somebody marked done, we don't mark the interaction done right away. We actually call a save log API from Salesforce to create a Salesforce task with information that we passed over from that interactions. And we do the same with our, with our latest adapter also. So in these cases, as you can see, it provides us with, and the top one, as you can see, that's, even though it says service, that is Lightning, and then the bottom one that we have is, of course, the console, the old classic console. So both of these, we use OpenCTI API. And so many people have asked me, and I've answered this many times, we want an embedded toolbar directly in Salesforce. Well, unfortunately, we need to go back and talk to Salesforce because this is how their OpenCTI works. It's always embedded in an iframe. So because of that, we are limited by what Salesforce offers to us. The one thing that we can do basically, or you can do yourself if you're using the toolkit to write your own integration, is to take advantage of other API that Salesforce offers. So in the old one, they have like the console API that allows you to manipulate Salesforce tags and all of that. So basically, that can also be done if you write your own adapter. But the other thing, the one other thing that's very important that we are able to, if you have our G+ adapter, you can also use the Service Client API that is part of Workspace Web. In that case, what you can do is you can add the Service Client API into Salesforce. You can basically use the events that is in Salesforce to manipulate additional commands or get events data from the adapter in this case. So for example, we have a customer today who's already done this. What they've done was that when a agent navigate through Salesforce, if they tap to a field that happens to be a credit card information, for example, they want to stop recording. So they basically do that, and then at that point they call the stop recording from Service Client API, pause recording, for example. So in this case, they're able to stop and start the recording based on the agents tapping through. Any questions before I move on to the next?
This one is available in 8.5 or? So
this is an example of how to do the integration. So this is the top one is our G+ adapter, 9.0. And then the bottom one is our adapter for 8.5. So, but these are just, I wanted to show you that this is something that have been done before, and we actually are we are using our products, a lot of our products ahead of time before we provide it to to our customers and partners.
Yeah, but we are using side by side, and when there is a hesitation embedding WWE into CRM because of
real estate.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's one little trick, right? We have. So in the old console, only in console mode. In console mode, they have the ability to pop it outside, but the integration is still there. So basically, what you do in here, you can still affect. So it's still screen pop. You can still do a click to dial and a click to dial. And the same thing with Lightning. Lightning actually was a little bit behind. They just added that very recently. I think within maybe about the last.
It's fixed in summer 19.
Yes, so in summer of.
It was out before that, but it didn't work very well.
Okay,
Summer
so since summer of 19, they fixed it. So it actually previously in our 8.5, you have to use the API to create that pop out. But now in Lightning, they actually have done it out of the box. So because of that, you can just click on that and it will pop out. And we have in our adapter, we put in controls in there to ensure that if you refresh, it doesn't affect that pop out with buttons. So. CRM integration with the agent API. So in some cases, you may choose to just use the low-level API, for example. So this is one example of a POC that we did internally, where we actually used Oracle Service Cloud, and then we just embed a lot of the buttons. We create the buttons ourselves, and then of course we will be able to get the pop-up and all of that. The problem with this is that, for example, we have to continually maintain all of the new features that Workspace Web have. And it's very cumbersome for us because let's say you're moving on to the PureEngage Cloud, you want screen recording. Well, that means that somebody has to go in and manually code this for screen recording. And because of that, our roadmap cannot be aligned. Let's say you have one group that you onboard one group that are using Workspace Web, for example, and then you have another group, and they don't have the same features. So it's a little bit. But if you have a very, very direct workflow that your agent wants to do, you're welcome to do this. But as a product company, we couldn't keep up with that. But we currently, this was just a prototype that we did. So. The provisioning API. So having the provisioning API, using the provisioning API is done by some of our customers today. They may do it in their HR application. But if you have a CRM, you also have the ability to basically create a button and then write some Apex code basically, and then triggers to ensure that when a user is created, they will also be, the information will also be uploaded to Genesis. So. Endless possibilities. Everybody likes that word, right? But of course, it's going to be dependent on your use case. So you can do web services call. So talking specifically about CRM. You can use web services call directly from our designer to CRM for data, and then that data will basically controls how you want to route, how you want to basically provide information to, downstream. Campaign synchronization. You can actually do campaign synchronization from CRM to CX contact. I missed that. So to CX contact, so that you will be able to, to create, all of that data sync and then run the campaigns and then have it deliver. So it kind of closed the loop for campaign management. And of course, routing CRM objects with Genesis task routing. We will have a session tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock for Genesis task routing, where I will go into some examples of how to do it with Salesforce, and then we will also have a hands-on sessions right after lunch to go, to have you basically go in and play with a little bit about that code. So, what I want to do next is introduce you to one of our partners, Ingenious, and they are one of the first partners that we have on board to our PureEngage Cloud. They have been working on this for since the end of 2018, basically. So I want to invite Mike McMahon, who's the Director of Software Development, and he's going to come up here and tell us a little bit about the experience that he had with our, with our products, with our API and, our sandbox. So.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. Sure. So as Kimberly mentioned, I'm with Ingenious, so I'm the Director of Software Development there. So we wanted to talk a little bit about our experience integrating our product with PureEngage Cloud. So first, I'll give a little context about our product, the company, our product, and the product basically that we're integrating into PureEngage Cloud. So Ingenious provides a connector, basically that connects PureEngage and now PureEngage Cloud into leading CRM. So we do this obviously to improve agent productivity, customer satisfaction, and we want to make sure that we protect the investment that our customers have in their infrastructure, because they may have paid a pretty penny for their Genesis infrastructure, and also to protect the investment they have in the workflow that they've built over the years. So Ingenious does CTI, so computer telephony integration. We have done this for quite some time. We have a large number of customers all across the world. We have many of those customers are enterprise or Fortune 500 companies, and we're sorry, my apologies. So we're many enterprise and Fortune 500 companies. So a little bit about the features of the product that we integrated with PureEngage Cloud. So we have, first and foremost, a bunch of features that are really all about the productivity of the back-end office, and we call it the contact center and the agents. So features that basically reduce the time to handle calls, features that allow agents to create accurate and detailed notes and put that right into the CRM, basically things that really are built around the agent's productivity. Secondly, we have features that are all about customer satisfaction. So we have KPI reports that can be used by managers in the contact centers to make sure that the contact center is performing adequately and make any adjustments if necessary. We also have features that provide agents with data right at their fingertips, so that every call is a warm start. And kind of the top of our business value, I guess, is really around workflow integration. So every single one of our customers has a unique workflow. So Ingenious has been designed, of course, to fit seamlessly into the customer's workflow. So we've been a partner with Genesis for quite some time now. So this was not our first rodeo with Genesis with PureEngage Cloud. We already have some supported integrations with them, specifically with the PureEngage product. And so this experience now is really taking that and building on their integrations with the PureEngage Cloud. So as you might expect, our existing integrations are available on App Foundry right now. The work that we were talking about now with the integration between PureEngage Cloud and specifically Microsoft Dynamics is planned to be released and available in Q3. So that's the project that Kimon was referring to earlier. So what does a typical deployment model look like? Again, provide a little bit of context. So as you might expect, we typically deal with CRMs, typically cloud-based. We do have customers who have on-premise CRMs, but it's typically a cloud-based CRM. We have an Ingenious server, which is sitting in the customer network. It could be in the customer's cloud, and that server connects to the phone system, so it monitors all the agent connections. So, our journey about using PureEngage Cloud. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the APIs that we used as part of the development and give our insight into our experience from doing that. So we built this in a series of logical steps. Typically what we would do is we would take the APIs that are kind of documented on the developer's site. We would build little prototypes, make sure that we understood the API and the behavior of those APIs, and then take that experience and integrate that into the product. So we'll start where we started was on the authentication API, of course. So certainly our initial impression of this API is that it was actually very easy to understand, well laid out. The documentation was very clear. So in general, I would say the APIs are really well documented on the site. So that helped a lot. The team that started with this project were not necessarily experts in OAuth. So as you may have heard in other presentations, the Genesis authentication strategy is based on the OAuth standard. So there was certainly some ramp time and learning time from our team to understand that, work with the Genesis team to come up with a strategy for authentication and so forth. One of the surprises that we had, as I said, we basically took that and we typically build a prototype, make sure we get things working, and that was all fine and good. When we took that learning into the integration with our product, of course our product integrates with Microsoft Dynamics. One of the things that we learned as part of that experience actually is that Microsoft Dynamics itself imposed some constraints and limitations on the authentication strategy. So we had to kind of go back a little bit, rethink about our strategy, and come up, basically take those constraints into account. So that was a little bit of a surprise on our side. So nothing to do with Genesis itself. It was just integrations with another third party. Sometimes will have some constraints. One thing that we were glad we could do while we were doing this is we had a couple of team members who were working on this. So as we were working through our authentication strategy, we were able to have another person who was starting to look at some of the voice call controlled APIs. And Postman was a very useful tool in this manner. So Postman has an OAuth flow built right into it. So we were able to use Postman and a series of steps essentially to be able to grab a bearer token so that we could use that to experiment with some of the other APIs while we were reworking our authentication strategy. So when we started, as Kimlin said, sometime I guess around in 2018. At that time, some of the tools that are available to you now were not available to us. So specifically, you're learning a bunch about the Toolkit. Unfortunately, that was not available at the time when we were starting to build this. And so our integration and that experience is all about using the raw APIs. This was not that much of a headache because, as I said, the APIs really are very clear and well laid out and well documented, but I'm sure the toolkit will be all sunshine and rainbows. So that was our experience. The other issue that we had, I guess, in the very early days is we didn't have access to the dev console. So this caused some problems and difficulties in debugging. Specifically, we were starting to run into a lot of CORS issues, so requests coming from one domain not being allowed in another. So without dev console access, it was a little more difficult to debug what was going on and all of that sort of thing. So it's solved by sending requests into Genesis to whitelist the URLs that we needed to do. This caused a little delay, right? We didn't have local control of our environment as you would expect in a cloud-based provider. So that was one of the issues that we were coming across as part of the authentication. But overall, a very easy API to use and understand.
And just to reiterate, Dev Console is now available for partners use.
Yeah, to be clear, and I'll cover that in a couple of slides. We have access to Dev Console now. This is just in the very early days of the project. So once we finished and got our authentication strategy all figured out, the next part really that we focused on was really around the session management. So this is really around the workspace API. So again, our impressions of that API was that it was very easy to use, well laid out. The documentation of the flow of the sequence of events, including use of comment D for messaging, was very good. So it was very easy to follow. We were lucky that we were able to use Workspace Web as a little template for us to follow the interaction and that flow. So that was certainly very helpful. Fiddler is a tool that we have used in the past as well. And that was a very useful tool to debug. So using it to kind of decrypt and watch raw messages go back and forth. So that was a very good experience. Some of the challenges that we had, we continued to have CORS issues, especially as we are getting into providing redirect URLs inside of Microsoft Dynamics. Again, we don't have access to the whitelisting, so it just is a little time consuming to have to go and make those requests for somebody else to do configuration versus being able to just kind of do it yourself as you find it needed. So we continue to have some of those issues, and some of the other issues that we found is the kind of determining the shape of the data returned from events. So as I said, the documentation was actually very good from Genesis, but it wasn't 100% complete, and so some experimentation was necessary at the time. But that's part of software development anyway. So that's our experience with the session management part of the API. So once we got through that, then we can really start to apply a couple of more people to the project. So once we got the authentication and everything going, that's really when the project started to take off. So we were able to add a couple more developers in, we were able to add more testers in, and that the progress really started to escalate. So again, with the voice part of the API, we used almost all of it probably. So all of the APIs allow you to do things like make and receive calls, transfers, put calls on hold, consoles, all that sort of thing. So we used a good chunk of that API. We bought the whole set. So again, kind of a common theme. The API and documentation was very good to work with. One of the things that we really found, and the team really liked with the PureEngage cloud, is that the data and event model was very intuitive. So I'll compare that to our experience with the on-premise PureEngage product. So the on-premise PureEngage product, we would receive a set of events, and we would have to interpret that string of events to figure out what the state really is. So we found that the state model and the data model very good and clean and easy to understand in the PureEngage cloud. So the team really enjoyed working with that. And this is where we started to get access to the dev console, as Cameron mentioned. So certainly that made it much easier to do debugging, so that we can kind of see requests and responses happening. One of the challenges, the biggest challenge we faced and currently face, is really the lack of an in-house test setup. So this slows development. So there's a balance to be played here, right? So one of the things when we started the PureEngage on-premise project was that at the start of that, we spent a tremendous amount of time setting up the environment, right? It was very complicated. We actually had to get a third party to come in and help us set that up. So that front end of that project took a long period of time. However, once that's set up, now you can control everything you need to control. So as you're building it, you may want to fiddle and tweak things so you can test different scenarios and things like that, right? So now it's all at your fingertips and all within your control. So it's a balance to be played. When we're working with the PureEngage cloud, we didn't have that test setup, which was awesome. We didn't have to do all of that setup that we have with PureEngage cloud. However, the development cycle is a little slower because we have to interface with our Genesis team to get things and configuration changes made. So it's a trade-off. So an example of some of the challenges that we have with this route is kind of the routing not having access to the routing controls. So we have a set of people, as I said, kind of developers and testers who are working on the product, and we don't have control, so we weren't able to set up lots of different queues and everything for them to sandbox their work. So everybody's all in one queue. So what would frequently happen is the developers would go to a meeting and forget to turn themselves offline, and all of a sudden all of their phones would start to ring in the middle of meetings because the testers are testing and they're in the same queue. So lots of little challenges like that. So that's some of the trade-offs, as I mentioned. One of the things that we was a bit of a surprise to us when we started development is we had inaccurately believed that the Genesis platform provided native translation support. And what I mean by that is that like phone information, phone numbers and things may be in a certain format in the CRM. That may not be the format that is required by Genesis, right? So there has to be a translation that happens in order for us to send those requests. So because WWE, I think, actually are able to support that, I think we inaccurately believed that was part of the platform, which it wasn't. So we had to build that translation piece ourselves. Luckily for us, because we had an integration already with PureEngage, this was not too bad of a deal for us, right? So we could basically take a look at that translation support that we had provided in our integration with PureEngage, the on-premise project, kind of rip that out, massage it a little bit to kind of fit into the architecture of our PureEngage cloud, and away we go. So it wasn't that big of an impact to us, but it was just a little bit of a surprise.
And to be fair, we have to do the same thing for our adapter. When we took data from Salesforce, we also have to interpret what, so we set up a bunch of rules in order to do that. So.
Yeah, so as I said, it wasn't that bad for us because we had a solution. We just had to make some minor changes to it and flop it in. But it was something that was not really expected, I think. The other little gotcha, not a huge deal, but something that we became aware of is the data that we get back from events is almost but not quite the same as when you send a GET request. So example of this would be from when we receive events, we wouldn't have call duration, for example, in it. And we were it caused a little bit of confusion because the data looks very, very similar. Almost all, it's all the same structure, all the same data. You're just missing like a little bit of data. So it did cause a little bit of confusion, but once we realized what's happening, and it's perfectly fair, at the time the event expired, maybe Genesis doesn't have the information to provide that piece of data, so that's all fair. But it did cause a little bit of confusion as we were developing it. So as we're testing, as I talked about before, really some of the key challenges is really the local control of the variables, right? So when we build on integrations with on-premise projects, we have lots of control of the IVR trees and the digit collection and queues and agents and states and all that kind of stuff, and we can really fiddle with it so that we can, run different test scenarios and things along those lines. We don't have control of that right now, so we can work with the Genesis team to actually make those changes for us, but it just makes for a longer development loop, right? You want to be able to control things just as you need them, sort of thing, without having to pre-plan things out in advance and kind of working with other teams to configure it. So it's just a trade-off. As I said, we don't have to go through that whole big setup that we had to with PureEngage. But the development process itself is just a little slower because of that turnaround time. So we are working with Kimlin and the product management team at Genesis to see how we can mitigate some of those problems. So bottom line, it was fantastic to work with the Genesis team. They were a pleasure to work with. One of the things that we kind of really got out of it is they're really invested in our success, right? They really care that their partners are successful. So whenever we have any issues or things along those lines, they're very responsive to our needs. So they've been a great partner, and we really appreciate the help of Kimlin and her team. And basically the APIs and the data model and event model, it's all very easy to use. I know that you're talking about the toolkit over the next little bit. I'm sure it will be even easier, but even just using the raw APIs, it was well laid out and logical and easy to use. And just a learning from our perspective, I guess, as this was a first kind of cloud-based telephony system that we were integrating with, is that we just have to plan that development cycle and that loop is a little bit longer, and that's I guess reasonable to be expected. So come visit us. We are here. We're in the partner pavilion in kiosk B29. People will probably be wearing a sweater something like mine. So thank you very much.
And I want to give a special thanks to Ingenious for participating here today. And like, if any of you have children, you all know that your firstborn will always get all of the pain and the
favorite, 'cause I'm the firstborn.
So that so like I said, thank you to Ingenious. Working with them will just ensure that we will be able to improve our process, improve our platforms, not only for our partners but also for our customers who are looking to do their own integrations into our platforms. So thank you very much for being here today, and please come and visit Ingenious. And I'm probably holding